Good evening, folks. I am going to call this meeting to order at 6:01. And right after that, I'm going into the board norms. Hang on one second. I am pulling that up. This is my son's computer, so I'm having technical difficulties. 1 second. That's not it. And there we are. So our board norms are to maintain our focus, communicate respectfully, be present, keep the board productive and effective, and respect the agenda. And also, just as kind of a broader announcement, I just want to make sure that everybody understands that in between meetings, in terms of communication, especially via email, etc., we should not have any discourse or discussion via email. Everything that we should talk about should be within these meetings here. So I just wanted to kind of let everybody generally know that going forward for any email correspondence. Okay, and speaking of, oh boy, I love my son's computer. Sorry. Apologies. If I can only find it. There we go. Let me get back to our agenda. Okay, and does anybody have any changes to the agenda? No? All right, seeing none. We did have some correspondence, but I don't think really anything of note. Some things about long-term planning. Trying to think if there was anything else. Anybody else see any correspondence? No? All right, well, let me jump right into the annual meeting then. I would like to entertain a motion to hold the public informational meeting as Zoom only.
So moved.
I'll second that.
All right, any discussion? Seeing none, we will move to a vote. I'll start with our folks out in Zoom land. Dana.
Yeah.
Ann.
Aye.
Thank you. Ann.
Aye.
Ken.
Aye.
Howie.
Aye.
And am I missing anybody, Bob? I don't think, no. Nobody else. Okay. All right, motion carries unanimously.
What about us?
Hey, oh. Oh my gosh, so focused on Zoom land. Yeah, hey, let's try that. There we go. Mike.
Aye.
Joe.
Aye.
Yeah,
Aye.
aye. There we go. Now the motion carries unanimously.
Blame your son's computer again.
My goodness. Yes,
Wow.
Thank you very much. All right, so the reason we are all here, folks, is for long-term planning, and I would like to kick it off with our new facilitator, Les Edinson, who drove all the way up from Hadley, Massachusetts tonight, and hopefully it was snow, hopefully not freezing rain on the way back. I'd like to just allow him some time to introduce himself, and then we can start the process.
Well, thank you, Al. Hello, everyone, and all the folks who are with us virtually tonight. My name is Les Edinson. I'm a semi-retired elementary, middle school teacher and principal, currently working part-time with the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, providing some leadership support to schools and districts in Massachusetts. And I've done a little bit of work up in this part of the state and had an opportunity to meet your superintendent previously and some folks in one of the other district towns. And I'm really excited to join you in this work and hope to be able to add some value to the really good work that has been done previously by the Long-Term Planning Committee. My role will be to help facilitate meetings, to assist in some of the planning, and I've had an opportunity to work with the board officers in just getting ready for this meeting tonight, and look forward to getting to know all of you. Just a couple of things that I'd like to mention in regard to the board norms. One of the aspects of keeping the board productive and effective is a bullet that reads, after a healthy discourse where all voices are respectfully heard, move forward with decisions made by the board, whether you support those decisions or not. That I think that's a very aspirational statement. It's sort of saying that we've got to work things out together, and then once we do, we've all got to get behind it and make it work. And what I would like to suggest is that along the way that we seek to reach consensus in the different topics that are up for discussion. And by consensus, I would like to suggest a strategy that some of you may have used before called Fist to Five. Does that sound familiar to anyone?
Reminds us of a retreat.
Okay. Yeah. So essentially, it means talking things through until you're you do five, meaning I'm totally behind this. Count on me. I'm an early adopter. I'm a leader in this. 4, I mostly like what I see. I may have a few reservations here or there, but I like this and I'm with you. 3, I have my reservations, but I can live with it. 2, we need to talk. And 1, it's going to take some work to convince me. So consensus means that all of the decision makers on the board are in a place where you're 3 and above. So it doesn't mean everybody has to love everything, but it means that it has to be good enough for everyone. And places where we don't have that consensus, that's a need for further discussion and further work. And I mention that now because the work that you're charged with doing here is really important work, and as you know, it's work that has to be done with the head and the heart. And there are a lot of emotional ramifications to the choices that you make. There are a lot of values embedded in the decisions that you'll need to take. And it's important that that's out there and visible, and we have a chance to talk and work through that in ways that work for your communities. So I just want to throw that out here. There, I'm not sure that we'll have a need to use that strategy tonight, but I think it's something that we need to have in mind as we guide the work going forward. So this meeting tonight is primarily an organizational meeting, and it's a way of sort of defining the scope of work for the board around long-term planning for this year. Before we actually jump into it, I'd like to have do a little connection activity where those of you here in the room can do this with a partner. Those of you who are with us on Zoom can think individually, and we'll give you an opportunity to share. But I want you to just take a few minutes to think about why do you live and work here? What is it about this community that is compelling for you? So let's just take a minute to think about that, and then I'll ask the folks in the room to share with one another.
Great. Excellent. Why do you live and work?
Quality of life.
Whenever you're in.
It's like rural. It's a happy accident.
Yeah.
I got moved here for a job in 2003. And, you know, I love places too. So like what different, like a lot of what it has to offer, and it was certainly a place to raise my kids.
Yeah.
But, you know, I did not. You know, it was a happy accident.
Right. I think this would sound like we intentionally
Yeah, and I never ever in my life said I want to go live in Vermont.
You don't see it everywhere.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
I mean, it's small enough that you get that. Good and bad, but, you know. Yeah, right, right. Be a lot like a man. Yeah, I came here to work for Chroma, and I quit within like a year, and then I was like, and that was 22 years ago.
Yeah.
It's like,
It was a nice
I'm here.
place to be.
Well, then before that, I had been doing the Worcester to Boston commute on the Mass Pike, and I was like, somebody should be. No, it didn't seem like a way to spend forever.
That's true. I love
But at 25 years, it's just something weird.
Yeah,
You know, I love the access to
yeah,
ski.
no, it's got its own funky little thing going on.
And,
It's
fly
changed over those
fishing.
25 years too, but it still has an appeal.
Sure.
Yeah.
Good.
So let's share some things here. Just jump in.
I said quality of life, the rural quality of life. Less people, less congestion.
We got somebody in the waiting room. Oh, sorry. And apparently Chad is working, which is not supposed to be.
Oh. Yeah,
You need to disable
Yeah,
Chad.
that shouldn't be functioning.
Okay. I will. Yeah, get that. Sorry, chat people.
So we paused for a minute here because the chat feature needs to be disabled. And is that because of the requirements of the open meeting law?
Yeah.
Advice of counsel, yeah.
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 So with apologies, because that would work very well for all of you who are with us virtually. But we'll have a chance to have you share with us in a minute too. So great, thanks for getting us started here.
Could somebody answer the person's question in chat?
From the
Ken,
board.
we'll have them state it. Say it out loud.
It wasn't a question, it was a wanting to share the quality of the reasons in chat. And Bob chatted back to them and so it's all good, right?
Awesome. Awesome.
I'd say it's a great place to raise kids, safe.
I would add that everybody looks out for each other.
It's a small enough community where you know the people living around you, and actually know them.
Does anybody in Zoom land want to jump in?
Yeah, it's home.
It's home.
Well, say more.
It's home. It's like being at home. I mean, for those of us who've gone away and come back, we come back to home.
Yeah.
Safe.
Yeah, I moved to where I'm at, so I could live in a place where my kids could walk to school and we could live on acreage where nobody would bother us.
Yep, I can call him. So Annan is next. Go ahead, Ann.
I feel that people here value community and helping their neighbors. And compared with other places I've lived, I believe that people here really tend to take an initiative to make things better rather than waiting for someone else to fix it for them. And I also really appreciate that it's very embedded in the culture here that people value natural beauty and an active outdoor lifestyle.
Joyce, Graham Pamela wanted to speak.
Thank you. Yes, I wanted to be able to say that I really enjoy teaching here because I have the opportunity to be able to really get to know my students, and with the size of the school, I'm able to know my students and make connections with the younger children before they come to me as fifth graders. So I find that is really nice. And I taught in the inner city before I came to Vermont, and there were just an awful lot of people, and they would come and then they'd be gone. So the connections are important.
I see a hand.
Oh, Scotty's got his hand. Scotty Tabashek.
I just wanted to just to say that my wife and I intentionally moved to Vermont in 2004 because we were living in a big city, and we wanted our children to grow up with an appreciation for the outdoors, knowing how to have fun in the summer and the winter and the fall and the spring. And we wanted to live in a town where there was a single high school. And we wanted to be able to be actively involved in our children's lifestyles, athletics, clubs and activities, and their schools. And now I get to work at Newbrook, which is right over the hill from where I live, but in an adjacent district. So I'm not a taxpayer. And that I find to be really helpful as well for my work, because it would add a lot of complexity if I worked in the district that I was a taxpayer and a parent. So I really am very lucky to be where I am.
Is there anybody else who'd like to share?
I think some others have talked about it, but outdoor activities and just surrounded by nature.
I would add a little emphasis to the comment about families being involved in their students' lives here, but also the community being involved in the growth and well-being of all of the children.
I want to echo what Lindsay said earlier a little bit about the idea of like family and people sort of watching out for each other. It's almost another layer for me, having been in other places, came here for a while, left for a while, came back. The idea that it's not only that they look out for each other, they genuinely care about each other. And Mike and I were talking about it's sort of like a family. The community is like a family, for good and bad in some ways. but that you know that there'll always be someone who will pick you up if you fall down, I think, and that's the part that I like most about this place.
Well, that's a pretty powerful list. Just to kind of go back to the beginning here, there are a number of comments about quality of life issues here, and relationships, and the community aspect of life here, the safety, the scale. all of these things are really crucial values, and I think a challenge in going forward in this work is going to be how to maintain some of those core values, how to maintain that sense of community, that sense of caring, the relationships, the connections between people, if some of the directions that you move dictate some change in what now exists. So the change has to be change that is going to preserve what you value, and that's got to drive the work. So thank you for sharing that. And as the outsider here in the room, please keep me honest if you feel that in any way I'm steering you in a place where you're losing sight of some of these core values. So, you have a task in front of you. And could someone say a word about how you've restructured this task? Why have you chosen to shift from the work of the long-term planning committee to a full board? And what do you hope to accomplish?
Yeah, so definitely the reason we are taking all the great work that the long-term planning committee did and bringing it to this meeting format like this and having you as a facilitator is to make sure that we have full involvement of all of our stakeholders, be it administrators, be it community members, teachers, anybody who wants to have some involvement in it, say, as you were just talking about, some of the core values that we just described in that last little session right there.
When you talk about stakeholders, can we describe that a little bit? Who are the stakeholders?
Yeah, okay, good. So we want to generate a list, perfect. Well, I'd say the number one stakeholder is probably going to be the students. I think let's have everybody kind of jump in on this.
We'll go with the staff as another one.
Taxpayers.
Definitely.
Taxpayers is probably / community. I mean, that's what we're really getting at too. I mean, they're much more than taxpayers. They're supporters, they attend the events, they, cheer for the sports teams, watch the theater productions.
I feel like that's two different stakeholders though. That community is the community is a different stakeholder in mentality than a taxpayer is. Because taxpayer as an entity is looking to get the biggest bang for their buck.
Yeah, they don't have to be involved.
They don't have to be involved. Whereas when we're talking about the community in general, I think that we are talking about people who want to be involved.
Right, so for now, I've just made those as two different categories. Who else?
Parents.
Aha.
I think Dana's got a... Dana?
Yeah, local businesses.
That's a great one.
Now, this may be what you're thinking about in taxpayers and split community, but what about residents who don't have children? Folks in the community who have no direct stake in this, but they're part of the community. Is that covered by taxpayers and community? Okay.
How about property owners?
That's kind of tax.
Second homeowners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about future parents? Parents of young kids that aren't in the district yet.
Future rebels.
Are there social clubs, churches in the community that are affected?
To me, I would bundle it. I feel comfortable bundling it as community.
I think civic organizations function differently than individual community members. I would put in.
Are there civic organizations that you
Yes.
want to be addressing? Yes.
Yeah, it could be select boards, I guess.
Okay. Sure.
So this is a pretty good and pretty diverse list, even for small communities. And it begins to point the way to the groups of folks and who you want to be hearing from, communicating with, taking into consideration as you go forward. Thank you. So one of the first things on the agenda was a mission statement. And I think that's on your agenda because it would be very helpful in the wonderful website that you've constructed to archive all of this work, to be able to lead in with a statement of what it is that this group is trying to accomplish, and being able to state that in a way that's very clear to all of your stakeholders. So that's something that's going to evolve a bit. But what are some of the things that you would like to see included in a statement like that that captures your purpose, your sense of purpose?
I've got a question, Les. So is this to be distinguished from the West River mission statement? This is a specific long-term planning mission statement?
Yeah, so if I'm one of the folks on that stakeholder list, and I'm trying to understand what it is that the board is trying to do through this process, what can I look at that tells me, here's the charge for the board for this work right now?
To provide a world-class education for our students at taxpayer-friendly prices. Something we haven't been able to do for a while.
If at any point you find my writing losing legibility, anyone is invited. Take the pen.
10 times better than mine, Les.
I type for a reason.
What else? I'd like to add to that. Great. Thanks for getting us started there, Mike.
I think we're really trying to figure out a structure that sustains and preserves those values that we talked about earlier. We could make wholesale changes that would change things drastically and probably provide that world-class education at a taxpayer-friendly price. But it would make changes to the structure and the community and the way education is delivered and has been for years that are unacceptable to a lot of the stakeholders. So there's much more to it than just price. It's preserving, sort of a culture and a way things are done at a way that and to keep it sustainable.
Yeah.
We've spent a lot of time, compacting things and cutting the budget and keeping things the way they were and taking a little bit away here and a little bit away there and shrinking a little bit. And I think rather than continuing to do that, we're looking for a way to say, we can keep going and doing this, and this is going to do the things that we want it to do as a community.
Can I speak?
Sure, go ahead, Alec.
Cutting to the chase here, we had a planning committee that put a lot of time and effort into coming up with the plan, which was centralize all the kids in one spot in Townsend. And that plan was met with a lot of pushback around the community. And that is really why we're here as an entire board, to really settle the question. I mean, we're tiptoeing around this like it's not really the question. But the real question is, do we keep running schools in each town, or do we centralize all the kids in the district in Townsend? That seems to be the big future planning question. And, the setup for it is that the way we are running things now is somehow unsustainable. Somehow after, hundreds of years of running a school in each of our small towns, it has somehow become unsustainable, which is something that I question personally, because I just don't see how it's unsustainable. We could just keep running schools as we've been running them. So that, has to be an option that's on the table. And now we have to really carefully evaluate, do we want to put all the kids in one town? So that's why I think we're here.
So you were there at one point, correct? I mean, that recommendation was on the table, but was not embraced by the board?
Yes.
Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. And what were some of the reasons?
Well, people don't want to give up their town schools. People don't want to travel long distances with their kids on a regular basis to send their kid to from the small school in their town to the small school down the road. It affects property values in the towns that would lose their schools. It involves a lot of extra travel for kids. And it's actually in the Vermont Constitution that schools ought to be maintained in each town. So, there's a lot of reasons why putting all the kids in one town, a lot of people, object to it.
So it's decision time, and that's...
There's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah.
There was a lot of, the planning committee, looked at a lot of things. Heck, this board, this is the third time we've done this, and we've looked at all kinds of options. And the problem that we've run into is we've never gotten to an option that makes consensus. And, keeping running a small school in every town, continuing doing what we're doing, if that's what the public wants, that's what we could certainly do that. But we have to be extremely honest that that is not going to be at a taxpayer-friendly price. The cost of maintaining buildings and transporting students and hiring staff in 4 locations is just going to continue to go up. And based on the funding formula in Vermont, That's never going to change. So, you know, the continual battle that the board faces and that we're trying to plan around here is how do we continue to provide the same amount of service that costs more every year with less money, with declining enrollment of students. You know, there is a real sustainability problem with education in the way we have it set up. You know, we could sustain it if we're willing to just bite the bullet and pay whatever the tax rate is. But, you know, low price, high quality, harder and harder to do, so we have to look to change that.
For sure. So we're gonna come back to this in that, but, yeah.
Ken, you're first.
Thank you. First off, when this district originally started, one of the first things that everybody was told would not happen is that a school would not close without a vote from the town to close it. And so what this the conclusion that the future planning committee came up with was we're going to put all the kids in Townsend. We're going to make a preschool out of Newfane, so it'll still be open, okay, but not intended as a full school. And we're going to make a hands-on learning center in Jamaica Village School, which essentially what you did was you just closed 2 schools to all students, all age students, which if you think about it, that turns around. And if somebody wants to move to Newfane, that's great. If all they're worried about is their child going to kindergarten, or if their child's going to move to, family's going to move to Jamaica, that, well, they have this great hands-on learning center here that the kids go to part-time, but my child's going to have to go to school in another town. So why don't we just move to that other town and worry about our child being bused to the other, you know, and that's the other thing, is being bused to the, I don't want to say, not career center, but the immersive learning center. And there's a lot of things around this that they're just not kosher, because when the whole district was started, they were told, every town was told that their K-6 school was going to be left alone unless the taxpayers of that town wanted to move.
Ken, I'm sorry, I'm going to cut you off there. We're trying to get healthy debate on the table here. We're not going to rehash that at this moment.
No, this is healthy debate. Okay, we're not rehashing anything.
Ken, I understand, but
nobody said anything about it.
Ken, you're repeating yourself. I already heard you say that, so unless you have another point, I'm going to move on to Fiona.
Yeah, okay, you move on.
Okay, thanks.
You're muted.
Can't hear you, Fiona.
I started my video, but not my audio. Hi, everybody. I know we're talking about the mission statement, so I don't want to veer from that. But when it's an appropriate time, I would love to share from a parent and from a employee perspective why the small group long-term planning plan fell short for me. So whenever that's appropriate, I'd love to share that, but I don't think that's now, correct?
Yeah, I think all of these things that are being brought up are all important and significant, and they'll need their place, because if we're going to come up with something that is going to be supported across the community, we've got to find a way of preserving the things that need to be preserved, and convincing folks that if things are changing, that they're changing for necessary and good reasons. And that's doable, and that's not all going to happen tonight. But thank you for certainly helping me understand a little bit of the landscape of opinion around that.
I was just going to add to the mission statement, if we can get to that, that I think that another important point to focus on is providing not just a world-class education, but an equitable education to every student in our district. Because we don't serve one town, we serve many towns. And that doesn't necessarily mean exactly equal, because I'm sure that that's coming.
Al, Fiona's hand is back up.
All set, Les?
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, Fiona.
One of the things I appreciate about Newbrook is that it's a place-based education, and I think that's one of the things that I think is core to the mission of that school. So I would like to see that incorporated into the mission statement.
So I'm sorry, I missed the term that you used.
Place-based education.
Place-based.
Meaning that the kids are engaged outside, doing science through gardening, being outside in an interdisciplinary way that's incorporated into the curriculum.
So
kind of defining for me what world-class education means.
I very much appreciate what you brought up. I think there'll be a place to talk about that very specifically at one of our future meetings, where we really want to focus on the educational quality and the aspects of schools that you want to see in place, and to be able to do that and look at that through the lens of equity, through the lens of sustainability, etc. Will be the work to come. So I'm not writing it up here as part of the mission statement yet, but it's kind of folds into the idea of world-class education, core values, equitable education, etc.
The reason I bring that up, I'm sorry, Howie. The reason I bring that up is that I think many people have a very different idea of what world-class means. And if we have a mission statement that has something as vague as that, then I think that may not help us really land on what's valuable and what's important for what kind of educational facilities and programming we have. So I think while I understand a mission statement needs to be universal on some level, I think being vague by saying world class, for me as an educator, doesn't mean anything because it's not saying what world class is.
No, absolutely. That is something that needs discussion, definition, and something much more concrete than.
So you had Dana first, but then he put his hand down, and then Howie. I'm not sure if Dana.
Oh, okay, Dana and then Howie. Got it.
He put his hand down, so.
I was gonna say, the statement should say, we strive to provide an equitable education that is above the standards. And I understand your place-based, Fiona, but not the whole district is involved in that place-based program. That has to come later on down the road. So your mission statement should be a generalized statement, and then you get to the specifics later on. So if you could put to strive to provide an equitable education above the standards set by the state or community or whatever, that is in consideration of the community and the taxpayers. Somebody can probably tweak that even better.
We'll wordsmith it, Dana. Go ahead, Howie.
Yeah, I agree that I don't like the statement of a world-class education at a reasonable price because it's fanciful. It doesn't, you get what you pay for in this world. We can't deliver a world-class education at a budget price. Let's be realistic and say something we can do. Let's give our taxpayers a good value for their money. Let's get the best bang for our buck with the resources we have, which I think is more realistic. I'm sorry, Mike. I know it's a.
Don't worry, man.
It's like that excellence in the pursuit of excellence. It's just it's not grounded. But, you know, a good value for our taxpayer dollars is grounded.
So are there any final thoughts?
Yes. Yeah. So is another way of saying that what Howie just said, that we would make efficient use of our resources?
Yeah. Very nice.
So these are some great ideas here. Al, let me turn to you here.
Sure.
And would you be able to kind of take charge of this chart and draft something to come back to the board?
Yes, absolutely. I will draft it. I will look to wordsmith it and bring it back for next time. Yeah,
Great.
Absolutely.
Now, let's talk for a few minutes about the timeline for the work. What are some of the decision points that you're looking at that you want to be ready for? Because you've talked about this already for several years, and you could probably talk about it for several more.
For sure.
I think we're trying to come up with a reasonable plan for maybe the next budget cycle, assuming that this current budget that's proposed is going to pass.
And next budget cycle meaning FY '24?
Yeah. It's at least a noble goal.
That's right. So what that means is something to act on in the September, October timeframe.
Okay, so there would need to be some specific recommendations by October 1st, say?
Sure.
And would this need to go through a process within each of the towns? Or is this just internal for the work of the board?
It depends.
Depends on what we're proposing.
Yeah, good point.
Maybe you should explain what that means.
Yeah. So
Les understands it.
Right. So as was.
You saw the look of confusion.
Yeah. Vermont's complex.
Yeah. As was alluded to before, if any of the recommendations were to close one of the schools, then that is not anything that the West River Board can do. Mm-hmm. That is completely incumbent on the whatever town we're talking about. The town would have to vote to do that. We cannot. It's part of the Articles of Agreement.
So that would have to be on the warrant for a town meeting.
It could be a special election.
Or a special.
vote.
Yeah,
Right. It could be special. Yeah.
Okay.
Is that your mouse or is that a hand? Is that your mouse or a hand that came in there?
Oh.
That's your mouse. I was like,
That's a weird looking hand.
The hands are a little more
I've never seen that one. It's weird.
So, in order to get that done by October 1st, certainly the big question has to be answered. But before just jumping back into that, is it possible for us to get a little bit of a summary here for everyone in the room and with us virtually of the work that the long-term planning committee has done to this point and sort of where you are, what's known, and how residents would have access to that.
Dana, since you did such a great job at our agenda meeting, did you want to go ahead and recap that?
All right. We come up with, well, what the long-term planning was, 3 options. One option was keep it as is, go in the future. Second option was the centralized single campus model. And the other option was sort of a single campus model with pre-K through 8 and 9 through 12 being farmed out to those were the 3 options that we kind of had when we ended this. The long-term planning committee was pushing toward the single campus pre-K through 12 option. That way we keep all our kids within our district and not farm any of it out. And we were trying to figure a way to do that in the Townsend area. But a group of parents from Newfane came up with possibly farming out our high school. So that put that option on the table, and we looked at a pre-K through 8 in Leland and Gray. So, and then of course the keep it as is what we got now. So does that sum it up, Lindsay, Leanne?
What do you think?
Yeah.
So that's about all I got. Let's go from there.
So in arriving at that, you did a lot of work. You've looked at a lot of cost estimates and enrollment patterns and so on. And where is all that information right now? How is that accessible to not only the board, but the community at large?
It's on the website.
The West River website has a specific long-term planning link with archives to any documents that were presented and discussed in the long-term planning committee. And then I believe there's additional documents in there from previous conversations the entire board had before the long-term planning committee existed. So discussions going back many years, at least 5 probably.
At least. Joe, when was that?
Can I interject? Like, we talked about doing an immersion center in the Jamaica facility, and we really didn't hash into that properly enough to really focus on that. And then using the Newbrook facility for what, special ed or something. God, I can't quite remember what it was exactly. Not just the pre-K, but something more. We didn't really hash that out. We just tried to focus on the centralized one, right?
Yeah, it was a discussion about there had been interest in using it as an in-district program, similar to like a Kindle Farm type special ed program, but that would be in-district to keep that funding within the district and potentially bring outside tuition into the district as well. That was the gist of that conversation.
Well, we didn't do a really deep dive into that. And the immersion center, we were still researching other schools within the state that have programs similar to that. And I mean, we didn't even have time to even like go visit a couple of them. But it's just too much to do. And I was figuring the centralized campus would be a main focus for us to see if we can make that work. You know, hopefully conserving resources, pulling our assets, it being centrally located, travel would not be extremely far. But yes, probably not having 2 of the schools open would probably be the give.
So the ideas are out there, and you have a sense of possibilities, but it sounds like the details still need some kind of deeper analysis. So just as a for instance, and this is coming from somebody who's poked through the website, which I find really impressive, but there's a lot of stuff there, and it's really, tricky to find what you're looking for in some cases. So, for instance, if you were to keep things as is, do you have a sense of what the capital needs are of each of your buildings? You do. You know that, okay? And you know the operational costs that you'd save if you consolidated?
Nothing.
We know, yes, we know those numbers.
Okay. Okay.
But that's what we were told.
There is savings. To say there's no savings is not.
There was never any savings presented.
Yes, there was.
Every time we asked, it was said that it was going to be pretty much cost neutral. It's my recollection.
So, okay, are we going to get, I don't want to go into the weeds here.
I don't want to go into the weeds either, but I'm just bringing this up that at some point you do go into the weeds. And so one of the things that needs to be done is that for the various recommendations is to start looking at the costs and benefits of each of these, and to be able to put that together in a way that's pretty easily understandable and accessible to folks. So in thinking about the work of this group, that's something to kind of factor in. So you're not only looking at dollars and cents, but you're looking at educational options, you're looking at the considerations of bringing multiple schools together and what that involves in curriculum and pedagogy and sort of impact on staff and so on your bus routes and all those kind of good things. Is there anything else that should be out on the table at this point about the work that's been done that everybody in the room should be aware of?
There's work done previous. This describes the work that this current long-term planning committee that just met last year did. There's also a presentation from June of 2018 that was the first sort of how do we change things to be more sustainable and more equitable, that was presented with some research done. And then after that there was a process where the whole board went through about 11 or 14 different iterations of what the district could look like, and that exists in document form.
That is in those archives on the long-term planning.
Yeah, with financials regarding that, yeah.
It's hard to find because I was just looking for it. We probably could do a much better job of sort of highlighting that information. I'm not quite sure how, other than to just say, here's this, and put links or something. But like I was just looking for 10 minutes and couldn't find the 11 or 14 or whatever in the archives. Now I'm sure they're there, but some organization might not hurt us.
Yeah, and I think that kind of gets to the next bullet, and that's why we put that in there for the Suzanne, if you're out there, the request to maybe collate and synthesize and pull it together into a more digestible view of what has happened previously, and kind of a chronology of what we've done. Does that kind of make sense? That would help everybody? Yeah.
Oh, look, she just left the meeting.
There she is. We'll talk, Suzanne.
So it might help in doing that if there were a series of questions that that you would answer within each of these models.
I would say the questions would be, how much does it cost? What are the pros and what are the cons? If you have that for each of the major pieces, whatever that means, whatever things we would, I mean, I don't think we necessarily need that for all 14 or whatever it was things that we've discussed previously, maybe more, certainly
Or
more
even
that
for
we've
the
discussed.
historical ones, yeah.
But having a handful at least. I mean, we've certainly had those conversations. That's not necessarily new work.
Right, just
And those are conversations that probably will need to involve some of the stakeholders that you've identified earlier too.
So Les, would that be useful for the next meeting? Like if I can connect with Suzanne on maybe getting just bullet points of these at a high level, and to Lindsay's point, just, you know, what are the cost outlays, what are the pros and the cons? All out of that info should be out there anyway.
Would you find that helpful?
Excuse me.
I think that the community would find that more helpful than the board. But I think that the community would find that helpful.
Yeah. And that could be evolving too, and then maybe aspects to this that you don't know yet, or you want to find out in a little bit more detail. But that would be great to start organizing in that way, sure.
Dana,
oh, go ahead, Dana.
Dana.
Yeah, I was just wondering, did we nail down those 14 options down to like 4 best ones? Because would we really want to go through all 14 of those again?
We did do that, I think.
Didn't we put them down to like the top 4?
Yeah, we did, and I'm not suggesting that we go through them all again, but let's at least show everybody the work we've already done. You know,
True.
rather than like, what about this? Oh yeah, we went through that too.
Yeah, I just don't want to get quagmired again into the 14. But yeah, if for people's sense of history, yeah, that here, this is how we got to here. Total makes sense, Joe. But I just don't want us getting caught up in the 14 again.
Have we had his hand up before?
Howie, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going through the website now, and I can't find any evidence that where it shows how money would be saved by consolidating. All I found was the page of all the improvements that would be necessary to Townsend Elementary to squeeze all the kids in there. So, I mean, it looks, you know, I know there's so much work that's been done, but when you look at what's there, it doesn't look like it saves any money. At least I can't find it. I mean, if somebody could point it out to me, that'd be awesome.
Right. All right, we'll tease that out when pull it all together.
So as you do this, are there ways that you can disseminate the information so that people in the communities are informed as you go, rather than being in a position of reacting to something that's already a fait accompli?
Yes, totally. And so, yeah, that would be the next piece, the communication piece, right? So I would imagine it would be great for us to have communication in between, and if there's similar questions, if 10 people ask the same question, collating those questions, and then trying to get as many answers as we possibly can in between meetings, and then talking about it during the meetings. And then also we can have board members go into the community, you know, have listening sessions, solicit feedback, and we can bring all that back to the full board. Kind of we're a little bit limited with the pandemic right now, but I'm hopeful that over the summer, this may ease and we could actually be out in a better way with the community.
Fiona, okay.
Oh, go ahead, Fiona.
What I'd love to see in terms of communication is a much more equitable dissemination of information. The board has never sent information home with kids, like to get to parents. That's one way that would be wonderful to get information through the PTOs, through Front Porch Forum. And it would be really helpful as both a community member, a parent, and an employee to utilize us as resources, not just asking for our feedback. Do you like this or not, and why? Because I'm so excited to see those 14 options. But in talking with other people who are educators in the community, we have lots of ideas that have never really been able to come to you in a concrete way to kind of utilize the resources that we have to help make decisions.
Well, you are certainly a stakeholder, Fiona. So, yes. And
But do you see how you said you wanted us all to be stakeholders, yet the only people that are going to vote on this, the only people are those that are on the board. And so from my perspective, if you really wanted stakeholders to be a part of this, you would have stakeholders being voting members of the decision-making process.
that's
Statutorily
that's
prevented.
that's statutory. Yeah. We're elected to make those decisions, but yes, obviously we want all stakeholders' input.
Al, I just wanted to touch on something you said recently. I'm not sure how to interpret the sending board members into the community. Like at this point, I know we talked about it before, but at this point, I think we should do it all as the board, if we're going to do these meetings as the board, instead of a subgroup going off and reporting back. In that sense, I would think. Just my 2 cents.
It's a good point. Very good point.
Howie?
Go ahead, Howie.
Yeah, I want to say that, we have to remember we are in a bubble. The folks that are sitting on this board that can afford the time to put into the board. We have cars with snow tires and studs. We have resources that a lot of single parents and parents in our community don't have. They don't have the time to come to one of these meetings. So I am all in favor of reaching out to parents through passing out stuff with the kids. Let's do a questionnaire to, the parents that are here now. And again, reaching out is going to be important because the kids who are most in need have the parents with the least resources to make their voice heard in something like this.
Thanks, Howie.
So I'd like to come back to Fiona's point for a moment. The decision-making may be a charge of the board. But if the community is going to be behind that decision, then it's really essential that you're hearing all the voices, that folks have opportunity to provide input, and that you're taking as many proactive steps to accomplish that as you can. And I don't say that suggesting that you haven't done that and that you haven't found ways to do it. But these are decisions that affect the quality of life of your communities. So, you all value that community. Let's tap into it as best we can, and maybe there are some ways to do that creatively. but an important point, and thank you for bringing that one up. Do you think everybody in the community is aware of the website itself? Has access to it?
It's tough. I mean, how do you reach some of the people, right? If you don't have kids in the school, you might be just a couple degrees separated from what's going on, and you might not know the pertinent details.
So that's a good question. How do you reach those people?
Well, you know, Front Porch Forum, Brattleboro Reformer article, perhaps, you know, we could talk to somebody about the process we're gonna go through and that we're looking to make some changes. That'll get some ink. You know, Fiona mentioned Front Porch Forum. I know every school posts every shred of this stuff on Facebook, so we are on social media. You know, I think we're trying really hard to reach as many people as we can.
I agree.
And I think that, you know, I mean, Front Porch Forum is one that I know was suggested to us like last year, and all of a sudden now, you know, we do a pretty good job of getting our stuff on there. You know, and if there's another way to do this and someone brings it to our attention, I think we're pretty quick to hop on it.
Scotty's got a hand up.
Go ahead, Scotty.
Scotty wants skywriting. Right?
No skywriting. During COVID, one of the things that I noticed was pretty helpful, especially at the beginning when we were all like, remember how that was 2 years ago. I was sending a lot of letters home, and I knew that a lot of people weren't reading them because they were really long and I had a lot to say. And so I started recording them and making videos. Suzanne actually helped me with that. And I started putting them on our website, but more importantly, I was using Facebook, and I was actually sending via email these videos. I think if we had a spokesperson who could, you know, read short statements that made sense to people, I think that might be helpful, because a lot of us don't have time to read letters, and you know, that's one way that was helpful for us.
Podcast. Long-term planning
Just don't put me on
podcast.
Spotify.
Well, you wouldn't support that.
No.
Yeah, great idea.
Do we have access to the statistics on this website so we can actually see how many unique visitors we're getting?
Suzanne? Do you know?
Somebody does, probably.
Yeah, for
I mean,
sure,
yeah,
that's
somebody does, but
available.
who knows? I don't.
Because that would be the metric if we're looking, you know, the first step is to, you know, make the info on the website available, easy to find. And the second step is see how many people are actually looking at it. And the third step is to try and take some actions to increase those numbers. But having access to the numbers is a important part of that.
I have to do it for myself.
Samantha Bobat.
Samantha Bobat.
You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry about that. Hi. I had a couple of things. One is you guys have access to mailing addresses because the boards send out the tax vote information, right? The school information every year. So perhaps as more information is collated, you might consider doing a mailing. I know that's an expensive proposition, but those do go to every house in the towns that participate. So that might be another way. And I also had something to go back to the question and like the mission statement and the question of what needs to be preserved. And my question is, if in fact there's no cost savings, if that is the case in the end, what other reasons do we have for making change? For example, I know that in the last couple of years, staffing has been a real issue. So are we looking at other reasons besides cost savings for looking at these changes, like what else needs to be preserved in order to make this a viable and well-accepted proposition. And I know that's not something to be answered, but something to consider other than cost savings. What are the other driving forces that people really need to take into consideration moving forward in these times of education where so many changes have taken place and are going to continue to take place in the future? Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
So I think you've highlighted something that's come up a few times. Even if we don't want to use a phrase like world-class education, there are educational considerations that live alongside costs, and being mindful, aware, and making deliberate choices about that is going to be really crucial to your work. So there's, it feels like you kind of covered a lot of territory here tonight, and some of this is going to have to be synthesized, and I think that's going to be a charge for the board then in terms of next steps. So coming up with a mission statement, which you'll kind of take charge of, Al?
Yep, I will craft that.
If Dana has hand up again.
Go ahead, Dana.
Did we nail down the timeline? It's October 1st was the date? Okay.
Sorry, go ahead, Vince.
So then there's another big task here that revolves around the information on the website and kind of sifting through that and beginning to organize that. How is that best done?
Suzanne, I know you're out there, right? Or are you hiding? There you are. I see you.
Hi.
So you're the one who put most of that information there on the site. How best could we assist with kind of gathering that and synthesizing it into, say, like, one slide per this round, one slide for that hot summer night in June that we all talk about, and then maybe even way back to when Joe was heading up the cause. And what year was that? I don't even remember what year that was. 14?
Oh, well, we started really right after the West River Education District came in.
After Act 40, yeah.
Right after we became a merged district.
Yep.
2018 was really the first one where we started talking about consolidating as a RED, because we had tasked Bill as a board to,
okay,
just
so, yeah.
take everything off the table and show us what's possible. And that started it, and then we did one round after that with the 11, 14 / whatever, and now we're here.
Okay, so yeah, maybe it's just pulling those pieces together, but from 2018 to present.
I guess I feel like I came in maybe a year and a half ago, so some of those checkpoints I don't know. I would need maybe some interviews or some documents to see that I could consolidate and distill to be easy to digest. I guess that's the work that needs to be done on that. In terms of the history part, but I think there's also a whole mission and like moving forward part that really should be part of this as well.
Okay, yeah, great. So yeah, I will coordinate with Bill and probably Lori and and you on best way to pull that together, and to Lindsay's point, getting the cost analysis piece of it, and then any pros and cons that we would have had. I know that in that slide presentation, there are plenty of pros and cons that were listed, so I think you'll have a lot to work from. But again, just kind of synthesizing it for everybody to have in a nice digestible format, so they kind of know, here's where we were, and based on that, now where do we want to go?
And is the goal to have that by next meeting? So in the next 4 weeks, you work on that?
Yeah, is that feasible?
I think so, but we'll need to meet, but this is not for this meeting. But
No. Yep. We'll definitely connect. You bet.
You can tap me with that, with some of that if you want to.
Okay.
I lived it all once. I'll do it again.
And even if you had that in rough form, then that would be a good place to work from, and sort of seeing what else would be needed.
The timeline might be helpful on some of that to show the process as we've evolved through that. I don't know.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. When do we do this? And
Yeah.
Yep. Chronology.
Oh, okay. That I understand what you mean.
Okay.
So those are a couple of significant tasks to kind of get us moving here for the next meeting. Are there any thoughts that anyone would like to share before we kind of wrap up for tonight?
Go ahead, Fiona.
I would love to see a more concrete timeline. And maybe that's something to happen for next meeting, because I would like to see, because I think one question I have is, are you just deciding between those 3 options on the table currently that the Long Range Planning Committee had prior? Are you entertaining other ideas? And in moving forward, like if you need to have something by September or October as like the final decision, like, yes, we're going to move forward on this. Like, when are you really going to have the first draft, get community feedback, or like the steps of like, when are you getting community feedback? How are you going to do that? The timeline for collating that, the timeline for when are you going to stop with other options if you're bringing in more options? Like, because I think one of the things that happened last time is that we were up against making a decision in October, and the ducks weren't all in a row to make sure everyone had the information they needed to make a good decision. So I think having a more complete timeline would be really helpful. I know I'm a deadline person, and so like for me to know like when we need to reach out to the community, when do we need to have this decision, when do we need to start looking at X, Y, and Z, I think would be really helpful. And also thinking in terms of a parent, with my parent hat on, having the summer is a really hard time to get community feedback. So thinking about how soon you could get feedback or how soon you could involve people, knowing that the summer, if you want something done in October, like July and August are going to be really hard in terms of everybody's schedule. Something to think about.
Thanks, Fiona. And before we jump to you, Luella, apologies, just kind of in answer to that, Fiona. So I would think and hope that the reason we asked about communication, where we could communicate, how we could communicate, is so that we will have that consistent back and forth with everybody in between meetings. And so we were able to collate some of those questions, come up with frequently asked questions, so that everybody has a sense of what's being discussed, how we're tracking, and all that. So yeah, the goal certainly is going to be September or October timeframe, and I totally understand summer is tough, very tough. So I'd like to get a lot of that done before that. Go ahead, Luella. Sorry, you're on mute if you're talking right now. Luella? Okay.
I just wanted to touch on what Fiona said. I think at this point, if we're gonna have this exercise, I don't think we're locked into any of the old options per se, like consider them all, but let's put everything on the table and hear from everybody, because we really should, I think we are all trying to find the best path forward for our district. So I don't think it's just those past options. I mean, if there's a better option, speak up.
Thanks, Mike. Go ahead, Howie.
I think it's important for us to, be honest about how this board was formed as part of a larger statewide goal of seemingly closing small schools. When the vote was put up to form a merged board, a lot of people said the goal was to create a central district and close the town schools. And it was and then there were the people who were in favor of the merged board who said, no, that's not what it's about. It's not about closing town schools and creating a central district. It's about more efficient governance. And so we got to our more efficient governance, and lo and behold, the more efficient governance cost more money, and we're back to let's close the town schools and put all the kids in one spot. So there's a lot of credibility that needs to be, we need to be very credible about what kind of plans we're presenting to the community. Closing town school is huge. People plan their life around where they're going to live and where they're going to send their kids to school. People right now are making decisions about where they're going to live based on where there's a school for their kid. So the uncertainty of this whole process has been really disturbing to everybody, to the communities, to the kids, to the teachers. We really need to, put the cards down on the table and lay it on the line and say, look, either we're going to support our small schools or we're going to run this board in a way that nourishes and keeps our town schools going, or we are going to come up with a concrete timeline to close those schools and get everybody in one spot. And we need to get off the fence on this because it's hurting our community being on the fence. Thank you.
Thanks, Al.
I'm sorry to interject, but Luella couldn't unmute. Could the host unmute her? She's not being allowed to unmute. She has something she'd like to say.
Tried to unmute her.
Yeah.
Bottom.
Yeah, I think Bob tried to unmute her. Hang on. He's asking her to unmute.
Yeah, I don't think you can actually unmute her.
She's
You
the
can
only
just
one that
ask her to
can.
do it.
Yeah.
The host usually has the capabilities of muting and unmuting people.
You can ask to unmute. You can mute somebody.
She has to click on the little icon on the bottom.
Yeah.
She clicked, here she is. She clicked unmute and still gets an error message.
Kick her out and bring her in again.
Could you turn on chat so she can say what she needs to say?
No.
Okay.
She
You
might
can call
try
in.
signing off and signing back on again.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
can try
Or
that.
call in from the phone line.
Oh, I think she dropped off.
Yeah.
Or she may be trying to, yeah.
Maybe she's rebooting.
There
There she is.
All right, here we go.
Will it work?
And she's unmuted.
you.
Luella.
I think I'm unmuted. That's exciting.
Right.
Thank you. I'm so glad you guys have a facilitator. I'm really glad to see that as part of the process. I want to just echo the importance for context. As the previous board member was just talking about, people are planning their lives around what's happening. It's definitely, the current situation does not help attracting new families to the area, which we desperately need. And I also think that just when it's a long-term vision, like how far in the future are you really thinking? Because to me, it seems like 2 years, like it's very budget cycle driven and not really looking like, what are we trying to create here for the next 20, 50, 100 years? I think there's an opportunity to create something really magical and really wonderful for this area. And it needs to be done properly and with community buy-in, which I think is what's been lacking with the past several times the board has tried to go through this process. It's not just feedback from community members, but everyone has to be on board because they're the ones who are going to vote it up or down. And so there's a lot of educating that needs to happen. So I'm really glad to hear the idea of the spokesperson as well, because I think that could help. A champion, someone who can communicate effectively and efficiently and clearly about what you're working on, where you've been, where you're going, why you're making the decisions and the choices that you're making. And I think I was able to understand a lot of that by attending the meetings, which is great. But again, there's 20 of us here and there's hundreds, if not thousands of people in this community that these changes are going to be affected by. So thank you. Thank you for the work.
Thank you. Glad we got you unmuted.
So just to clarify, Alan, the recommendation that you want to reach by October is not necessarily for the next school year or even the year after that?
I think Luella brings up a great point, right? So, and Bob, a while back, kind of got us on track with this as well. Think of the end in mind, right? What do we want to do in 10 years? Where do we want to be in 10 years? Do we want to have a brand new building, one building that's pre-K through 12? If that's the end goal, then there's a lot that has to happen between now and then. That is a 10-year process. Mm-hmm. So, but those are the kinds of things I think, we want to dream big. We want to think farther out. And then some of those things, the year 1, year 2, year 3, year 5 will fall in line. That's at least kind of how I think about it.
So it might make sense to do some sort of visioning process that kind of allows you to do that, to think big in those ways. But of course, the danger is that you then get so far afield that it's hard to pull back. But let's think about that and think about some ways of tapping into what seems to be a lot of good energy and thinking in the community and on the board. I think that's doable.
For next time?
Yeah,
visioning process.
If we could.
Okay. That's great. All right. Any other thoughts or anything else?
I think we made it to the bottom.
Okay. Well, very good.
I just have
Go ahead,
one
Mike.
more thing.
Sure.
I'm just wondering, because we had some somewhat concerning census numbers that we saw recently too. So as we go through this process, we start with the end goal, but at some point we have to try to determine where's our student threshold. So just wanted to put that out there, that's going to be part of it.
No, that's a great point. And I think we all know that the further you go out, the
Right.
less valuable and informative
Right.
the information is.
Right.
Like, we don't know what our student population is going to be in 10 years. We have a better understanding of when the next year.
Right,
or
the
two or
kids in
three.
the system, we have a pretty good idea of
Yeah,
where
yeah.
they'll be and everything, but.
Helps if they've at least been born already.
There we go. That's right, 10 years. Exactly. Les, since we really didn't kind of formalize anything for the FAQs, do you think it would be in our best interest to say, let's just take email communication between now and the next meeting and try to collate it via a spreadsheet or something like that?
Yeah, no, that makes good sense. So how should people submit their questions? That they individually to board members?
Should be a central person.
Yeah, or we could just do it to the West River. What is the actual West River board address or email? How about this? Everybody send them to me, and we'll get you. We'll set up an FAQ.
Well, and we could put a link. You can set up a link on the webpage, like on the homepage of the website, to just ask a question, and it'll populate. And that should be like a 5-minute process, I would think. Send emails to you. I mean, communicate however you're comfortable, but it should be all right to put
We've done that before.
Yeah, just add an ask a question button that pops up a thing and drops it into the back end, and then we can answer it.
I think did we just give Suzanne another job?
I don't know if it's Suzanne or just somebody else in WCSU, but it's.
Is that an easy to do, Suzanne?
I mean, the easiest would be just a Google form that we could post a link to on the front page that would turn into a spreadsheet.
Perfect. There you go.
Fiona with a hand.
Love it.
How are you going to communicate to people that you are taking questions, besides those of us that are here?
That is a great question.
I have some suggestions if you'd like them.
Please, yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think it would be great. Every principal sends a weekly something out to each of the school parents. They're the kids' grown-ups. I think having something there would be great. I think putting something in Front Porch Forum, and also creating Front Porch Forum events, because you may be putting your stuff into Front Porch Forum, but if it's not an event, it doesn't stay there every day. And I think one thing that the Planning Commission did in Newfane that I thought was really effective, they were looking for community input into what to do with their ESSER funds. They asked people for input. They also had signs out in specific places at crossroads, at Route 30, and different places to let people know what was happening. So putting things up in visible places would be really helpful. And also perhaps communicating with your towns as to how they are getting information to their respective constituents, so that you can be tapping into whatever else is happening.
Post office, town hall.
Or if they're distributing something, seeing if you can get on whatever they're distributing, or how they've found it effective to communicate with their townspeople.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Ann with a hand.
Ann? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Ann.
Yeah. Just to add to what Fiona was saying, it might also be helpful if each school board member gave updates and information on how to be involved to the select board in that town, because a lot of the select board meetings are also taped and put on websites, and people watch them, and so that's another way to get information out.
So these are great ideas, but you might want to have some talking points that are consistent, that are going out, so that there's information about what the charge of the committee was, and what was discussed, and what you're actually asking people for, and then sort of make that somewhat uniform.
should this be more of a next meeting?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think it might be wise to make sure that we have a cohesive message, like you was just saying, in terms of the history of all of this before we ask for feedback and questions. So we work on that this month, and at the end of that, there's a survey or there's a form for questions. Just because I think right now that it's sounding like it's really hard for people to even understand. It's too discombobulated to know what the question is. Does that make sense?
It does. Cart before the horse. Yeah, got it.
Also don't want to confuse voters for budget vote.
Yes, yeah. Great point. Okay. All right. Thank you so much for the feedback. That has been incredibly valuable. We have all kinds of places now that we're going to communicate when the time is right. Les, anything else that we want to talk about?
No, I'm good here.
We're good? All right. Well, I will entertain that motion then.
What time and how long will our next meeting be?
Yes.
Before I'll make a motion to.
No, great. No, that's a great
out.
call. Get out. So they're going to be, we'll have 2-hour meetings. We're going to stick to 2 hours. It'll be the first Monday of the month. And they'll be from 7 to 9. We did special on this one, started at 6, but future ones will be from 7 to 9 on the first Monday.
So March 7th.
But you also, as you're saying that, we should probably also set the agenda building meeting, which should probably be, what are we thinking, the week before? 2 weeks before?
Maybe 2 weeks before.
2 weeks before? Okay, so kind of like right in the middle. So is Monday a good night for you?
So what are you thinking, 21st or 28th? Monday.
Let's see. On the calendar for me. Would that,
Those are
whatever
both
we do
during
2
our
weeks
vacation,
before?
just so you know.
Well, there's, like, you're thinking March 7th is the
Yep.
next meeting here.
Yep.
So 2 weeks before would be probably that week of the 21st. We already have a board meeting on that day.
We do?
Unless we
Okay.
move it for President's Day. Which we haven't done yet, but.
Which is, I guess, during vacation for LNG.
And that's school vacation week too.
Oh, yeah. Would a week before not give us enough time, Les? What do you think?
That could work. We'll
Okay.
make it work.
Maybe we'll make it work for this one,
Sure.
and we got
Yeah,
the
So 28th.
vacation and all that. Yeah, so the 28th, 2/28.
And that's just the committee itself.
Us and
in
Dana.
Zoom.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
What's a good time for you folks? 6 or 7, or you, Les?
I can do either.
I'm fine, whatever works for you.
7's better for me. I got food shelf that night.
Okay. Dana, is 7 good for you?
7's better for me.
Dana? I'm sorry. 7? Sorry, Howie, this is for the agenda building the week before. So on 2/28, we'll have it at 7 to 8 p.m. Okay, great. So we have those next 2 meetings set. Very good. Now, how about now, Joe? We good?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Have a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 All right, thank you very much, folks.